formerly Halcross and engineering consultants. I've been involved in various heritage railway restorations and work for just over 50 years now. And this is one of the latest ones I've been involved in. This photo here was taken at the Gala Day, Roberts Bridge Junction, when we hired in locomotive and stock from the Kent and East Sussex Railway just for the enthusiasts event. The location of the railway, this is taken from Addlestrop Railway Atlas. You can see there's a triangle where the mainline railways already become established, leaving a cluster of small towns which were not served by the railway at that time. And so a railway was proposed to link them together, and it eventually went all the way from Headcorn in the north down to Roberts Bridge to the southwest. As with all heritage railways, we're very dependent upon our historical context with the aim of preserving or recreating a bygone era. What that era is can have a flexible interpretation, generally around 1950s or 60s, as that is how we remember it. And note that the year of the Light Railways Act was also the same year that the Red Flag Act was repealed, heralding the dawn of the modern motor age. So you could say that the need for a success of light railways was doomed from the start, and that was rather unfortunate. They were not a success by and large. This was a Colonel Stevens line. Colonel Stevens may be described as an enthusiastic railwayman rather than a railway enthusiast. This was nevertheless a profitable business run without government subsidy. It's likely that very few of those 17 railways were making much money, probably just one or two county minerals, which would subsidise the rest. The Light Railways Act 1896 permitted lighter construction, subject to less onerous regulation commensurate with low line speed, and costs were cut by extensive use of second-hand rolling stock in a similar manner to today's heritage railways, albeit for a different reason. We're using second-hand stock because historical. He was using it because he wanted to make a cheap operation. So the Preservation Society was set up immediately after the line closed in 1961, but it was to be another 13 years before they got going due to wrangles over the light railway order. And the sticking point was the A21 trunk road in Roberts Bridge, which has remained problematic to the present day, but now it's going to be solved. And this is the level crossing issue, which I'll come to later. There are no aspirations to extend the line in the other direction. It's all lost and built on. So the light railways were not a success and of limited usefulness, particularly for carrying passengers, while road transport was on a rapid rise. This speed limit thing, it's quite difficult to find where the 25 miles an hour speed limit was written down. I did find it in the Regulation of Railways Act 1868. There's not any specific regulation on 25 miles per hour. The ORR just says that if you're going to go faster, then there'll be more regulations involved. So, for example, better level crossing, signalling, and that kind of thing. So it was all built very lightly. As you can see, there are many level crossings, many watercourses, no road bridges. And the rolling stock was very diminutive. And you'll have probably seen the stereotypical view of the Terrier locomotives, which have about just under 10 tons with a go-anywhere availability. And there's nothing light about a Light Pacific. This is 18-ton axleway. The Light Pacific was developed to go on the branch lines in the southwest, and that's route availability 4, and that's still the heaviest thing ever had on the line. The large locomotives drawing the crowds, which is good for revenue. To allow for this, the line has progressively been relaid with flat bottom rails on concrete sleepers, and the bridges have been upgraded as well. All new construction that we are doing is going to be to the RA10 category, which is well over the top for what we need, but it's future proofing it. The route of the line. Okay, this we've got the missing link, which is about 2 miles long, going between the two level crossings. You've got the road on the yellow road on the left, which is Northwich Street. That was the old A21 through Robertsbridge before the bypass was built. The bypass is the Green Road, which is a trunk road, and then on the right-hand side, to the east, you've got the Junction Road, and we've laid the track is in situ from Bodiam Station right up to Junction Road, and the track is in situ from Robertsbridge Junction Station in the west as far as the Yellow Road. And so that was basically as far as we could get up until the present day, when we needed to go through the full process of the Transport and Works Act application in order to get the orders for level crossings. And we've also got a bridleway in the centre there. So you've got the 4 level crossings, 3 highways and a bridleway. So progress to date. The Kensington East Sussex Railway had already been established, and then in 1991 we set up a separate company was set up to try and restore the last bit from Bodiam to Robertsbridge to complete the route. So the first thing to do is to get the route safeguarded in the local plan. That doesn't mean you've got planning consent, it just means it prevents people building on the line or impairing the track bed in any way. So we got the first bit open. So we were all up there. To as far as we could up to Northwich Street, and then as I showed the first opening slide, the 2013 Gala Day, then we had a network rail connection restored in 2016. That's quite important because we intend to bring materials in by train as much as we can to avoid road congestion. Then we put in the planning application about 2013-14, and then we got the planning consent, but that didn't enable us to really make a start. The Transport and Works Act order is what really mattered. Another little bit of progress, we got a turntable installed at Robertsbridge Junction as well, which came from Hither Green, and it was commissioned in May of last year. So building a railway is potentially quite straightforward. All of those aspects there we can do ourselves. We have highly skilled, qualified members, and we can handle all that. What we can't do is the planning and the ecological studies and the flood modelling, for which we've had to use paid consultants. And this is where it all gets very costly and complicated. If it was just a question of completing a railway, I reckon we could probably do it in 18 months. There's no serious earthworks. There's a few bridges, but no serious impediments. So the planning process was quite protracted. And we submitted it in June 2014, and we eventually got it 2017, but approved conditional. And that is the big thing. And this illustration here illustrates the amount of paper that has to be submitted. This was actually Linton and Barnstable Railway, not ours. I think nowadays it's got slightly better because we tend to submit documents as PDFs rather than hard copy. There's a lot of paperwork has to go, and I do have my doubts as to whether anybody actually reads it all, but you assume they do, and it has to be done properly. All documents will end up in the public domain. They can be viewed by anybody through the freedom of information request. And so, it's going to be a proper job, otherwise you won't get anywhere. And it was very demanding to achieve this. So we employed NTR, a planning consultants. And there, of course, there were objectors, as you might expect, and we had to go through public inquiry, and this was delayed by a year due to COVID. It sat for 19 days between July and September in 2021. The planning inquiry makes for a long read. All the usual arguments were rehearsed. So I'm not going to repeat them here. You've heard them all over the last 200 years. So nothing changes, damage to crops, damage to animals, all that sort of thing. You've heard it all before. So then there was inspector's report came out, and the inspector found in our favour. The next stop was the Winkworth Sherwood parliamentary agents to draft the Transport and Works Act order, the granting of which was still at the discretion of the Secretary of State, with major concerns over level crossing safety. Up to this point, we managed to spend 1.6 million without any certainty of a successful outcome or indication of timescale. So it's not for the faint-hearted. You put all this money in, and it could all just go to nothing. The comparison there is the Welsh Island Railway, which took 35 years to reach the same stage, and it cost about £750,000 for a much longer line in a national park. Over the years, you could say that the regulatory procedure has ramped up, and there's a lot more involved now. So 3rd of August, yippee, we've got it's in the bag. Or 2nd of August in, but it doesn't mean you can just let rip, because we didn't have planning consent. It was conditional. There were still a lot of things we had to fulfil before we could consent. And level crossings were and remain highly controversial, but are now all fully authorised by the order. In terms of setting a precedent, this is huge. There's no reason why other projects, such as Cambrian Railway and Oswestry Street, can't go through a similar process as us and obtain a similar result to break out of their constrained site. I think probably the government or OR doesn't want it to be a precedent, but it's likely to be. And it wasn't that easy either. We had to really, push hard for this. As for compulsory purchase, the inspector deemed that the project was sufficiently in the public interest that the benefit outweighed disadvantages to landowners to whom compensation is payable. Now, there's no property demolition here. It's all floodplain, all open fields. So we're not knocking down anybody's houses, but we will be causing inconvenience because they'll have to get across the line. So all the land was sold back to the farmers, and although we tried to negotiate, they were not going to sell to us easily. So the A21 is the trunk road, national highways as well, and we had to demonstrate to OOR that there was no alternative. You can't just say, well, we'll do it because that's what we want to do. We had to demonstrate that there was no alternative. So I looked into going over, and to go over, you'd have to have a 1 in 45 ascending gradient and an intrusive embankment to a height of 8.8 metres. And you can imagine now, if you've got 1 in 3 side slopes, both sides, you're looking at a footprint of something like 50 metres. It'll be huge. We then had to think about going under, which would be a 1 in 55 descending gradient to below riverbed level, and that will require constant pumping. So again, that was not suitable. I mean, you also got the issues of management of the water level in locomotive boilers, and going over up a sharp gradient, then down again. It was going to be very difficult. So we had to. Well, we were successful in demonstrating that level crossing was the only sensible answer because of the topography in the area. The railway is practically at the same level as the A21. So I have to, at this point, are we playing trains? Well, the answer is yes. To begin with, all heritage railways start with enthusiasts who want to maintain the heritage and produce. It starts with a hobby, doesn't it? Really, but then it does develop and it becomes a major economic benefit. And this was a study that was carried out for the Festival of the Welsh Island Railway in 2008. and the predictions have come true, that for every pound spent on the railway, it increases the local spend in the area by about £3 because of the input in tourism, tea shops, bed and breakfast, and so on. It does have a massive economic input. So we've also done our own figures, which are there, and we reckon that will bring in 6.5 million economic benefit from construction, and thereafter the rail will support 34 jobs during construction. There'll be additional revenue on the national network as well as a result of the connection. And an additional strand is environmental impact reduced by enabling more people to visit the railway by rail through our physical link at Robertsbridge Station on the southeastern Hastings line. So yes, it started off playing trains, but now it's a serious business and it will bring massive economic benefits and environmentally friendly as well. The planning hurdles, well, the Transport Works Act order is the start, not the end. We still have 30 planning conditions which have to be met before we can make a start anyway. And the cost and delay is quite exasperating, per se, and unquantifiable, and it just sort of drags on. And despite successive government pledges to cut red tape, there doesn't seem to have been any tangible progress to date. If anything, the opposite. Labour's pledged to build 1.5 million homes in 5 years has little chance. Everybody is equally affected and treated the same. It's not just us. There's this planning system which affects everybody. They're not picking on us at all, but they can't give us any favours. Everybody has to be treated fairly. I would say that a lot of this procedure is non-productive, self-sustaining, and costly to the economy. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I? But I mean, it's just you wonder what is the point of it. You end up with the same railway as you started with, but you have to go through the process. So we've got 30 planning consents, and HS2 had 8,276, and it's still going on. And that is increasing the cost of the project. It has to. You can't just do this for free. So these are the planning conditions we have to satisfy. And I don't think any of these were needed by Colonel Stevens, or very few anyway. And so you just run through the list there, and we've got to go through and tick off every one. And until they're all done, we can't make a start. Okay, so there's 17 there, and the rest of them, if you can read through those quickly, the rest of them on the next page. Like that. As I said, none of this affects the outcome of the project. You get the same railway as it would have been. We just have to show we've done all these things. So I've tried to evaluate which of these will actually make a difference. Now, this is my opinion only. Okay, I'm not going to get my own way on this. We've got to do it. So, but I think a lot of this is of limited benefits. I've taken out 1 and 2. 1 and 2 was the start date and the drawings. You've got to have those. So ecological assessments, well, we did it, there's nothing there. And then river banks, we didn't find anything. Ecology, there's very little there. It's a floodplain and fairly devoid of any wildlife, really. And we've got management plans in there. Our footprint and our impact is very limited. And protected species, we didn't find anything. The appearance of the bridges, that just comes down to the colour of the paint, really. And it will be either, well, silvery colour. Battleship grey is a fairly common colour, which most people seem to like. It'll probably get covered in graffiti anyway. And so a method statement, we'll go through the usual thing about having bunded fuel storage tanks and not polluting the watercourse. We have to write that over and over again. Compensatory flood storage is equivalent to 24 seconds of flow. We have to create a void in the floodplain to compensate for the volume of the embankment, which we're reconstructing. And the contaminated land, there's nothing there. And other things like piling method statement, site access. we don't really know what to write. We have to have a stab at it, but until we have a contractor on board, we don't really know what they're going to be doing. We have to put something in anyway. And so there was the next lot, the traffic sensors for 3 years following completion. Well, I'm lost really to know what difference that will make, and will it have any impact after it's been built? And operational maintenance plan, well, we've got to anyway. Level crossing design, absolutely, that is needed. Restriction on the timetable. This is a bit of an odd one, because during peak hours, the traffic is almost stationary. So we're not delaying them we're not going to run trains on peak hours anyway, and they won't let us. But if we were, it wouldn't make any difference. The only problem you do get is traffic backing up and stationary in the yellow hash box. We had the same argument in Porthmadog with the Welsh Highland Railway. So it's a bit of a red herring, really. You have to go along with them. And archaeological investigation. Well, the new Iron Age. Yeah, we found a few fish cave bolts. We found a few track spikes. Is that what they're looking for? And the whole lot had been dug up and ploughed over and many times, so we didn't expect to find anything really. Another funny one in there: insurance for removal of level crossings. They have such little faith in us that they want us to put a pot of money aside to take everything out if we go bust. Well, nobody ever dug a road up to take out a level crossing. All they've got to do is tarmac over. So it's wacky really, but we have to go along with it. And so, right, so what do we have to do then? First of all, dormouse. You get dormices. They are protected species. Along the existing track bed, there was a corridor of mature trees over about 600 metres. And so we had to put lots of dormouse boxes up, and they had to be monitored for 12 months by a paid ecologist. We can't just do it ourselves. You've got to have people who are accredited and know what they're doing. And it might have been predicted in a floodplain that's submerged below a metre of water 2 or 3 times a year, you're not going to find anything because they would have been drowned. No newts are found either. They're protected but not rare. Usually, if you don't find newts, it means you haven't looked hard enough. But we haven't found any yet, so that's a relief.
It's obvious why. It's obvious why.
Yeah.
The dormice and there's no door on it.
That's right. So anyway, that's we've been fairly lucky with the wildlife anyway. That we haven't found anything that's tripped us up so far. So coming to the physical state of the line and how we're getting there. That's the present head of steel at Junction Road, and that was reached in 2011. And that was as far as we could go. We stopped there because to get across Junction Road, that would need the Transport and Works Act order and authorisation of the level crossing. So occasionally they had special trains running topped and tails from Bodiam on enthusiast days, and that's an example of one. And the pile of concrete sleepers is the just behind the buffer stop. Now we have to go across Junction Road. It's at the moment it's unrestricted road, 60 miles an hour, and quite narrow and dangerous. So it's going to be dropped down to 40 miles an hour. And East Sussex highways have been very supportive. So this will be going ahead this year. In fact, probably another 3 months. We've got the go ahead to do this, and that's a major indication of our intentions. It means we can break out of where we have been stuck for a long time. Flood management. The entire project is all flood risk zone 3, the highest category, with the exception of a tiny slither of land just south of Salehurst, on the site of the former hole. So obviously we've got an interface with the Environment Agency there, big time, because everything we do has to have the agreement with the Environment Agency. We can't do anything without. And that was always going to be the case, and we have to go along with whatever they want. Flooding. Well, it does flood quite a bit, actually. In practice, the track bed is submerged in some places between 2 and 3 times a year, mostly between November and March, as shown in these charts. So the green line is the sort of threshold, and every time you get a blip above the green line, that's a flood event. You've got Roberts Bridge at the west, Udium at the east. So forget about that outlier in 2020. That's a mistake in the gauge reading. So we have to be very selective in the time when we work and our method of work. We have to be able to predict and work around flooding and get the equipment off the site. Usually you'll get a 7 days notice of when a flood is going to happen. And in the summertime, you're pretty much okay. So this is west of Junction Road, picture taken November 2023. And the formation gets covered to a depth of about 0.3 meters. And that will be the height of the ballast. When ballast will go back, it will be at the flood level. So we'll need to take measures to prevent the ballast being washed away. And we have various ideas how to mitigate that. Not dissimilar to the same problems met by Network Rail. And then looking back, going towards Udium and Bodiam, the existing track bed gets flooded as well. This is more really a case of the water backing up from Rye, because we're all very low lying here, and the riverbed is below sea level, so it goes out through tidal sluices at Rye, and you can get a series of high tides, high rainfall, and it just backs up, and it takes it a while for it to go to be discharged into the sea. And the river is or was navigable indeed all the way up to Bodiam for small craft. So this is a familiar sight now, and if we're not careful, this is what can happen. So we're paying special attention to make our railway resilient. These are examples of the common flood damage that have occurred recently on the national network, and it's happening quite often. And so we are going to have more culverts than there were before, and larger culverts, and we're going to try and strengthen the track bed so it's less vulnerable to wash out. So the last thing we want is to have to go along there after every flood event and put ballast back. And this was one that we became aware of, Network Rail solution near Abergavenny. In 2021, we've had a massive washout. And what they've done there, they strengthened the embankment sides with large boulders. And those have come from South Wales, where they had access to granite quarries. We can't do that. We don't have, we could, but it'd be a long way to bring in the granite. So what we're using is old concrete sleepers, and of which we have many. And this is one we've done earlier, where the water was regularly coming up the face of the embankment. It's quite simple. Just get lots of concrete sleepers and lay them end to end on top of each other on the slope, staked in place. And that will prevent erosion. And what we will do then is where there's a risk of overtopping, we'll bring the sleepers right up to the ballast shoulder level. And we have lots of these because Network Rail have regular series of track relaying programs in the area, and they have to get rid of concrete sleepers which have no real value to anybody, and we can take as many as they want to give us using their rail link as well. So there you are. We have a free disposal point for old sleepers, and we've got a whole lot coming in. I think it's later this year. They're F27s. Which are fairly good quality. There'll be the odd tough one, but we can still use it for this purpose. So continuing on from east to west, the first bridge we come to, we call it Austin's Bridge, which was renewed in 1946. Austin was the general manager upon the demise of Colonel Stevens up until 1948 when it was nationalised and British Rail took over. It's a major bridge over the River Rother, a span of 14.783 metres, overall length of 17 metres. And it was in really good condition. It was built by Italian prisoners of war and just after the war. So yeah, it's a good bridge. And we've got the drawings. It's really nice. A late bridge, riveted plank girders in excellent condition. Unfortunately, the bridge was damaged by the landowner in 2023, and it looked like something out of Ukraine, and it was extremely frustrating. It had remained in place and out of use since 1961. It was deliberately vandalised on the eve of it being passed to our ownership. And so I think we'll say that the landowner was not too impressed by being served with a compulsory purchase order. So he had a heavy breaker, broke out the concrete deck, and also got a acetylene torch and cut 4 of the cross beams, and that was a particularly difficult job to repair. He also cut holes in the web and cut a lot of damage to the web as well. The bridge, if we hadn't stopped him in time, the bridge would have collapsed. But we tried to take legal action. Well, we couldn't do anything about it, really. The landowner allowed the concrete to fall into the River Rother, which EA knew about, but as far as we know, there was no legal action taken against him. And that's what it looked like. So, in my role as bridge engineer, my first assignment was, John, can you fix this? Well, yes, everything is possible. We looked into getting a new bridge, but there are logistical problems, and we had no option but to repair what was there. First thing was just to get a footbridge across for our own purposes, so we could just get across, and that took 3 months for EA to agree a permit to just put that scaffolding across to walk across and then over the gap. And we weren't doing anything to anybody, but because we are working within the riverbank or within 8 metres of the riverbank, all work needs an EA permit. And so we had to apply for the permit. Okay, so it's quite a complex repair because the old crossbeam sections are old BSB sections with the rare 8-degree flanges. They tend not to be rolled anymore, and so we couldn't find any second hand. And the bits that were cut out, left on site, were too badly damaged to be spliced back in. So we had to find the nearest column section with parallel flanges and splice it in. And it doesn't make a very good splice because you can only have the cover plate on the top and bottom and then not inside. But we've done it anyway. And it was quite a difficult job to do. We then had to put back the reinforcement that was severed and hang reinforcement down. And the concrete thickness here is 406 mil, or what's that, 16 inches. And so very heavy load indeed. And we had to support the formwork off the bridge by hanging down. You can see there in the foreground little strips with threaded rod going down, and that was to hang the formwork. You couldn't support it from underneath. We were not allowed to put any supports in the river, and the scaffolding underneath was only for personnel access. So that was the view underneath. Actually, we found evidence that this is the way it was constructed the first time round in 1946. Now, we were all ready to do concreting, and then we had to, then Storm Connell came. The day before we were going to pour the concrete, and now we're into the winter season now. And as I said, we get these regular flooding between November and March. This was the first or second storm we had. And so we had to call off the concrete. We were unaffected by Storm Bert. Storm Bert rips through the West Country, and Storm Connell rips through the southeast. So we were lucky with the first one, but were knocked out by the second wall. So it was a case of we got me to go down there, and I inspected the scaffolding. It was all in place, but extremely slippery with a sheen of mud on everything. Anyway, we got the concreting done, and with a huge sigh of relief. And we haven't quite finished because we have to do the upstands at the side, which I got to. You see, you've got that tapered haunch at the side. We'll complete that another day. That could be done any time. But it was vital to get this in because it's the only way we get access to the land to the west of Austin's Bridge. And we aren't allowed to come in through Salehurst, a little village. They certainly don't want construction traffic going that way, and it was the only way we could get in. So next bridge along was in a bit of a swamp area, and the bridge here also existed until 2023 when it was cut up and removed by the landowner before transfer to us. The old beams were still in, that's how they were up until the early 2023. And they looked as though they could have been reused, but with all the Colonel Stevens bridges, there's no planned bracing. Sometimes there are no bearing stiffeners either. So there's no way that would comply with any modern standards, and we'd have to do a lot of work on them, not to mention shot blasting and painting. And so we have to have walkways and handrails to meet current standard. You can't just have track going across a pair of way beams. You've got to have a walkway, if only for emergency passenger detrainment. I mean, with our standards you've got to have nowadays. So it might have been okay before, but not now. So we've got this big gap, or two gaps actually, to overcome. And the Bluebell Railway came to our rescue. Now, back in the 1980s, they purchased 5 spans from the A56 PFA transfer sidings. This land did though, when the A56 was being upgraded to dual carriageway. And they purchased 5 spans. They used 3, and these 2 were left in their car park at St Keynes for a long time. And the 3 they used are at New Coombe Bridge on their northerly extension, East Grinstead, and that was rebuilt in 1993. So the other 2 we've got, they will look like that. So we've got the full kit of parts, all the walkway, the handrails, everything was there. So what could possibly go wrong? Unfortunately, both spans were too short for our gap. So we need to have had to extend them. The 9-metre beams, we had to extend them by 1.425 metres and 1.775 metres. And the standard universal beams, the largest size, which are rolled. So we just went to the stock holders and got some offcuts at a good price, cut the right size and welded them on. We did look into modification of the substructures to use the spans as they were, but that would have been a lot more difficult with the consent because we would have been interfering with the status quo of the flood regime. So we took the line of least resistance and got the spans from Bluebell and extended them. And so we're very fortunate. We've got a little workshop less than a mile away, and they're really good at steel fabrication. They've been extremely helpful to us, and they're right on our doorstep. We just go there anytime and check the work and see how they're getting on. And they've done a really good job. And that's the extension piece with a cross beam as well. And so after it was welded on, we had to then do some testing. And because you've got full penetration butt welds, highly critical welding area. And as we all know, welds are sensitive to fatigue with stress fluctuations. The kink in the bottom flange in the right photo, that is intentional and it's unavoidable. Due to rolling tolerances, the new beams we got were within specification, but about 5 millimeters different height. So you just had to feather them in the best we could. The flange had to be made level, because we're having directly fixed track, and that's got to be absolutely spot on for level. So bottom flange just had to be joined on where it came to. And unfortunately, we had a slight problem with the ultrasonic test, so we had to grind out some of the welds, do them again. This is not well, a bit unfortunate, but we're not the only ones. You've probably heard that Severfield working for HS2 had huge problems with welds, and they're much bigger than this fabricator. So all the welds were retested, and they passed. And once they passed, you'll always get some small imperfections in welds, and so this was done strictly in accordance with the codes of practice. And you'll see there on the screen a little blip where it goes over the curved black line. That is an imperfection, but it's okay. It's within the limits. The top left picture there, the weld looks absolutely perfect, and you wouldn't have seen anything by the naked eye. But what we did, we painted with white paint, and you put a dye, a black magnetic dye on there, and you pass a magnet over it, and it really shows up cracks that you can't see, and you've never seen that. And it's only very, very small indeed, and it is within the acceptable limits. So everything is all right now. But it was very satisfying to be sure that what we've got is not going to fail in service. Obviously, it's got to be a proper job, and this has now been passed by the company who did the inspection for us. We don't do it ourselves. An outside firm had to do that. So the whole bridge was assembled in their yard and then disassembled for blast cleaning and painting. So there you see it with the walkways and handrails added, and there will be GRP walkways either side, left and right. In the centre, it's going to be a steel grid. We don't want to have GRP or plastic in the 4 foot away where you would get a discharge of ash, oil, fire from the locomotives. So it has to be more robust. The Delcor base plates type ALT421 we'll be using as described by Peter Barber at our earlier PWI meeting here in February. This is the variance for fixing the timber sleepers. We're using normal bolts with a direct fixing to the top flange, and there's a stiffness rating of 22 kilonewtons per millimetre. Now, this stiffness thing has to be taken into account when you're considering the way the track deforms and the interaction with the bridge, and they have other base plates with a different stiffness rating which have to be transitioned into this one, into these. Moving further on along, the way ahead for the next 600 metres, after 64 years of growth, you could describe it as an impenetrable jungle, and you could walk through there in the winter, extremely challenging. I mean, first of all, you had to get across this gap, which was very wet and swampy because the drainage had been blocked up over the years. However, we were permitted clearance for safe survey purposes only. Now, at the time of writing, we still do not have the full go-ahead. We were permitted to carry out preparatory works. Many of the trees were ash trees and were found to be already dead or in an advanced stage of disease, who would have had to be felled anyway. By now, we were well into the bird nesting season. That's not a problem, but we had to have a full-time bird specialist with us at all times to ensure that no bird's nests were disturbed, and some trees had to be left in place. So this is the track bed clearance as of April this year, and you can see clearly the old sleeper indentation. The impressions are still there after all these years of preservation. And so there's a lot of timber came out, and we do have a place full of timber with a buyer who will be taking the timber away for chipping. There's nothing really of a sensible size you can use for structural woods. It will go for wood chip and some renewable energy. And so that what we're selling it for helps to pay for the ecologist. Next one we come to is Salehurst Bridleway. And this one, there are a few horse stables nearby, and it's a fairly well used path. It's also a very muddy path, and we have to cross over it. And again, the ORR view all level crossings as a risk to be avoided, including bridleways. So we had to investigate alternatives before we could make the case for reinstatement. But just the desk study, really, just to demonstrate what a no-hope situation it would be if we had to go through a bridge option. Option one was to have the ramp at right angles to the railway on the line of the bridleway. And so you could see you've got a slope going up and a slope going down, and it's 1 in 16. Really, it should be 1 in 20, but that would end in the river. So 1 in 16 was as steep as I could make it, so as not to end in the river. The river there is on the line. So, the railway is the red centre line. And we don't own the land anyway. Option two was the other extreme. You'd have the bridge passing over the railway, but in line with the railway. So you have to go along, over and down again. And again, extremely impractical, expensive and obtrusive. And you're looking at something like 150 or 200, 199 metres of steel. And is it really worth it? Oh, we also have to look at an underpass as well. But that would be impossible because you'd be well below river level, as indeed for the A21. It would be constant pumping. So we managed to win our case that the right-of-way will go back, risk assessment will be carried out, the score is low due to the infrequent train service and a low speed of 10 miles per hour. Salehurst, there was a halt here at one time from 1903. It was like a private halt to start with, and then it was open to the public, 200 metres from the village. I don't think it really got a lot of use. We proposed putting the halt back. The halt there is it's just a line of sleepers, earth filled and gone a long time ago. But we met with stiff local opposition, so we took it out of the plan. There was also a siding there at one time on the left, just beyond the pillbox. The pillbox is one of several in the area which dates from the Second World War. We then come to another bridge, and again the Colonel Stevens era bridge, and no planned bracing, and it was in a very bad condition. This one will probably replace with pipe culverts or something like that. We have a overhead power line going over. You can just see the pole there in the background on the right, and so we can't have the kind of cranes lifting girders in and out. The headroom here is 1.16 metres, and cattle can just pass underneath. The idea is here to make it a little bit deeper if we can and improve the headroom so that cattle can pass easily, thereby reducing the need for accommodation crossing. Well, there'll still need to be an accommodation crossing, but it won't need to be used so often. And the next one, we call it Bridge 18. This one, we believe, can be reused. We'll have to add walkways and handrails. On this point, we're looking west with the A21, the line of trees on the horizon. We've cleared the ground here, cleared the topsoil, just push it to the side. That's as far as we're allowed to go, pending the full approval of the flood model and all the EA approvals. And then another bridge we come to, Bridge 12. This will be at a greater height because we have to get up to the A21, which is where that lamppost is, and it's on a different skew as well. Originally, we had intended to use one of two bridge spans, recovered from Carroll Lane in Reading. So, as the skew did not match that of the channel, the abutments would have to be built out, and this was rejected by EO. So we've got a bit of an impasse at the moment on this one, but it's low priority. We've got other things to be getting on with. Carroll Lane Bridge. This will be familiar to many of us here. That was 2011. Classic shot there of a high-speed train passing in the background with a little man hanging out the window coming to the station. The bridge carried 3 loop lines on the upside west of the station. We took out the left and right spans, so we had 2 really nice bridge spans which dated from the 1950s. And there they are in our yard, awaiting reuse, with some ex-Staplehurst bridge spans also there, which were second-hand from Network Rail. So we will try and use second-hand bridges where we can, and why not? It follows the tradition of Colonel Stevens, doesn't it? Sadly, EA have notified us as late as 3rd of February this year that we can't have piles within the riverbank, and neither of the bridges can be used, which is a bit sad. Coming to Millstream flood relief culvert, due to an alignment error, the red line, which is the centre line, is further south where it should have been, putting us close to the Armco culvert. The Armco culvert is 2.2 metres diameter, comprising 3.5 millimetre thick corrugated plate. Now you might think that's really quite thick, but it has that arch strength and it's perfectly okay. It's okay for highway traffic and it's okay for railway loading alongside. So it does have sufficient strength, but the close proximity means we have to have retaining walls on the approaches, and we can't push the alignment much further north because we'll be outside our limits of deviation, which we cannot infringe. And also there'll be a reduction in distance to the roundabout to the north, and that causes safety concerns as well. And this is the A21 level crossing. The lamp post on the right is pretty much on the centre line, and that was installed last year. So, I mean, I thought they would have known that we were coming in and just put it somewhere else. So, anyway, the view shows the close proximity of the roundabout, and I mentioned before rush hour delays are ill-founded because the traffic backs up. Beyond the roundabout, there's a pedestrian level crossing where people are pressing the button whenever they want to, and that causes more delay. The same situation as we had in Porthmadog, where you've got the argument about the railway causing delay, where you've got pedestrian crossings cause even more delay. So we're not going to be delaying things any more than that. So level crossing design, where do we start? Use a withdrawn document. Well, you've got to start somewhere. It wasn't withdrawn when we started, and this has been withdrawn because the ORR want to take us to take a risk-based approach. You don't just take the book and pick it out. I mean, this prior to June 2021, this document was valid. We started designing this 15 years ago. Now we just have to demonstrate that our design is okay to all the current risk assessment standards, and Arabs or our consultants, they're doing this for us. It's not something that we can do. So you can see the barrier time down will be 52 seconds. You've got 27 seconds striking, and the train will cross at 10 miles per hour. You've got as safe as we can make it. You've got automatic barrier with obstacle detection, so anything on the line it'll be evident. 10 miles per hour, you're going slow enough where the train can practically stop by line of sight anyway. And being supplied by Schweitzer Electronic from Switzerland. I believe that is Network Rail approved. It doesn't have to be for here, but I believe it has been approved, and there's 1 or 2 in use now. The level crossing will be precast concrete slab. There's an Edelon Cedra system. This is very popular on the continent, And again, it hasn't seen much use in this country. I think it has been approved now by Network Rail. The beauty of this is you can just close the road very quickly over a weekend, put the slabs in and put the road back very quickly. And here's one that we did before on the Kennedy Sussex Railway in 2017. So we've got the same team doing it, and we're confident we can do each of these in 2 days dead. So there'll be no delay. 2-day closure is all we need, and that will apply to each of the 3 level crossings. Now, going on beyond the A21 to Northbridge Street, there's a section of flood bund, and that was put in in 2003, designed by Halcro, my company, and I did know of this at the time, and the railway was known about, but our aspirations were not advanced enough to be taken into account. And EA paid for the flood alleviation scheme around Roberts Bridge, had devastating flooding in around the late 1990s, and so there's a flood bund. You can see it there, following the back of the houses, and then goes into that red oval, which is where the railway wants to be. So we're going to have to extend the flood wall and take out the bund. It's not a particularly demanding job. It will take about 3 weeks of work in the summertime to do, and we should be able to get on with that fairly quickly. Now, Bridge 6 was the other one where we had intended to use the one of the Carroll Lane bridges, but because we needed to have piles halfway up the riverbank, it was not allowed. The EA starting position is you've got to have a bridge 8 meters clear of the riverbank. So that's, as you see that now, that's 12 meters. So it would have to be 28 meter span, which is ridiculous. And for one thing, the track is so low to the land that you wouldn't have any opening below the spans on either side anyway. So it's back to the drawing board. That's the other picture of it, and it's in quite a bad state. That's as it is now, and there has been some damage to the riverbank on the left hand side, where the abutment has slipped, and British Rail put in a steel prop there. You can just see. So the outline design was prepared in 2013. Went through the planning inquiry. Everything was that no objections were raised, and then they just dropped it on us in February that it was unacceptable. So what we're going to do now, we're going to repair the existing bridge, and that way we can alleviate the need for a 28 meter span and just repair what's there. And that is quite a legitimate way to overcome EA's concerns. We're not making it any better or any worse. We're simply sticking with what's there. And that has now been submitted, and we're awaiting their approval. Okay, so we're on the home straight now. And that's the steepest gradient on the line, actually. It goes up the bank there. And other works, there are 5 bridges in rapid succession. We've got Northbridge Street level crossing, and we had to put in sheet pile, scale protection, all that's complete. And there's track load as well. And that's the other level crossing. Again, East Sussex County Council have been very supportive. We've got a lot of utilities there, but we're confident that with using the Edelon-Cedra slab system, the bearing pressure is sufficiently diffuse and spread out that we won't be adversely affecting any of these utilities. So we should be okay. And up the bank, and 1 in 98.7. Up to now, all the gradients everywhere have been about 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000, except for one short section when we've had to make the embankment higher to get over the A21. And 4 bridges, these are built in 2000, 12. I mentioned the Staplehurst bridge spans. These dated from 1904 from the river built Staplehurst, the tenuous connection to the site of an accident where well-known novelist of the day, Charles Dickens, survived. So a bit of history there. And there were we had a whole load of these. I think 11 of these we obtained. We took out got the best 4, got them repainted, walkways added, and put in place. And then Bridge 1 was a bespoke bridge with the west abutment there. You can see the east abutment was propped by British Rail. It's on a slope of about 1 in 6 inward slope there, and the west abutment wasn't a lot of good either, so we backed that up in concrete. That's the enthusiast day in 2013. Now here we are approaching Network Rail, and our line curves in on the left, and it's quite a sharp curve there, 147 metre radius with check rail, 7.5 trains that is. And you'll see there the buffer stops on the Network Rail siding. They are now extending that northwards back to the full length, and they have to repair the slip. At the moment, the track is hanging in the air. So they cleared their embankment last year, and they're going to be putting that back imminently. A turntable from Hither Green, which was with help from the Railway Heritage Trust. The locomotive is Britannia, whose availability 8, so it's far too heavy for anything on the eastern part of the County of Sussex at this time. But it was a good thing to just show off the turntable, which is manually operated. There's no vacuum motor, no turning handle. You just have to push it around. It's quite easily done when it's balanced. And so as Michael Portillo, a secret railway enthusiast. I mean, he comes across in his programmes. I do wonder whether he had any influence when he was in the cabinet. But he claims to take credit for saving the Settle and Carlisle Railway. And whether it's true or not, I don't know. That's his claim to fame. So we come to Network Rail. We've got a complex double reverse there to get from the main line, which is in orange, into the siding, and then back again into the bay platform, and then through our gate into the site. And they've got insulated track joints. Obviously, we don't want to get spare, traction currents going down our line because it's all electrified third rail there. And the main line, that link was commissioned in 2016. So we had 2 locomotives, and Mr. Hendy was there as well, and we had footplate runners up and down, joy rides for all the members up and down the little bit of line that we had. And there's Robertsbridge Junction station all ready, and it's being extended now with a new extension waiting room, and it'll be a lovely station when it's all done. Before that, we had a temporary kiosk with a famously leaky roof. It came from Victoria Station, which was, of course, indoors. You didn't have to have a watertight roof then. This is now off to a new home. And that's the new station. We've got the roof on now, and it's being built in the traditional style with the ornate brick plinth courses and bullnose copings and brickwork arches over the windows. And that's the platform view. I think you just see there some little holes for the canopy supports in the platform. We've got a water tank. Again, it's a true pedigree, Colonel Seymour's pedigree from Shrewsbury Abbey Station. Unfortunately, somebody dropped the base and it broke, and the cast iron can't be repaired, so it won't hold water. But we have a 150mm diameter pipe from a conventional tank somewhere else, so we can fill up the locomotives very quickly. Right, as I mentioned before, the entire project is on a floodplain. It's always going to be problematical. And the embankment had been bulldozed by the farmer. and sold as fill for the A21 Roberts Bridge bypass that opened in 1989. Just because the railway was there, it doesn't create any precedent at all. We have to go through the same rules as if it were a brand new. So the flood modelling commenced in 2015 by Capita Simmons, then WSP. And since then, there have been multiple iterations. We have to demonstrate that we're not increasing the water level by more than 50 millimetres. And that does seem to be quite a demanding challenge, really. Our line is parallel to the flow. Already there are multiple constrictions across the valley. You've got the Network Rail Hastings line in the west. You've got the 3 highways which go across the floodplain, and they are, in effect, constrict the flow. But we had to do the modelling, and the blue is a sort of the default, and we've got different colours there. And so there's a little patch in orange where we are can be a bit higher than it should be, and so we have to put in lots of pipes in that area. And it's a bit bizarre. We need to have 18 number 1.5 metre diameter pipes, and we're starting to ask questions. It transpires that in the flood modelling, we have to allow for 66% blockage of the pipes, even though there isn't anything there which will block the pipe. It's not as if you're in a highland area where they're felling trees and you get massive amounts of debris and rock. It doesn't happen. So we have to run with this for now, and we'll just see how it pans out. Old railway sleepers, I mentioned that we've got lots of these, and we can use them for creative purposes. And there we have a crib wall, and that could be used the other way around, where you're using it to support the railway. This is a bit innovative. The crib wall is designed in accordance with National Highways standards, but generally it's not used to support live load. But I have a cunning plan that we can design it to do so. And then the other one, that's on the Gloucestershire-Warwickshire Railway, where they've just stuck sleepers in the ground to address a slip problem. And we can do the same again, where we are in a tight space and we just want to protect the toe of the embankment. So, how are we doing for time? This is a bit of a reflection here about how, reversing beaching. It's a bit of a deviation from the Rother Valley Railway story. You'll be aware of the reversing beaching initiative. 199 bids were received. Labour government scrapped a lot. And my opinion that it's going to be extremely difficult to reopen any railways. The reason is that it's just too difficult and a lot of opposition. I'll just quickly run through this example. Stratford to Honeybourne line, which is one I know well. The Gloucestershire-Warwickshire Steam Railway there from Cheltenham Racecourse to up to Broadway. And tantalisingly, you've got a small bit missing between Stratford and Long Marston, and a bit in Cheltenham as well. So I started to delve into this, and there are a lot of new homes planned. Long Marston, of course, is where you've got the airfield, the railway yards there, and there are many new homes proposed, and they have green transport plans and all sorts of ideas. So, anything missing? The transport proposals most definitely do not make use of the existing railway corridor, and there's the reference there. You can look it up if you need to, and it's all rather bizarre. You've got just 5 miles, 73 trains. But the problem is you've got the highway just been put on the track bed. The network benefits are not considered. When they look at the justification for reinstatement, they're only just looking at number of houses and number of people, and it just doesn't wash. So this was scrapped at an early stage, and that's just a indication of the Evesham Road. Level crossing there, that is now the highway, a link road in Stratford. So it makes it very difficult to reinstate at the north end. At the south end, Gloucestershire Warwickshire Railway own the track bed as far as the Red Arrow. But there's no track on it at the moment. That's where the light railway order ends, and the last bit to Lansdowne Station in the south-west, that is partially obstructed cycle path, and it's got all sorts of impediments there. So it's unlikely to happen. You can't get a proper business case. Heritage Railways, has the bubble burst? Well, sad to say, we are going go through a bit of a decline. Coal has been coming from as far away as Kazakhstan, Poland, Colombia, up to £500 a tonne. Now, what's the sense of burning marine diesel to import what we already have? Well, this is the problem we're up against. It's extremely expensive. The volunteers are declining, so we have to pay for labour £12.21. That's £27,100 per year for minimum wage. And you can imagine all the extra passengers, the extra revenue you need for each person you're going to employ. But the legacies are well up. For example, on the Festinel Railway, 76% of their income is from legacies, which amounted to over £3 million over a 7-year period. The less passengers, the fares are very high. And overall, well, the guilt complex about burning fossil fuels for fun, I suppose. So, and this is part of our heritage, isn't it? Cost of railway reconstruction. Well, these are the recent ones that have been done. Welsh Highlands about £1 million a mile. Gloucestershire, Warwickshire about 2 million. Rother Valley Railway 3 million. So these are all done as cheaply as we can, with a lot of beneficial donations from industry and a lot of help. And you can see when you get into the mainline railways, the costs go through the roof. And Rother Valley Railway, of course, we're entirely voluntary organisation supported by gift aid. I'm being deliberately provocative here by suggesting the cost, the reason why things cost a lot, and the environmental issues. This was the Porthmadog bypass. That looks like a railway bridge. It's identical to our railway bridge where the Festinel Railway goes over, but no bats were found. And of course, inevitably leads on to the other one, doesn't it? Which is that one. I'll say that there's no way that can represent value for money, can it really? A possible way around this would be to have a separate fund, ring-fenced for environmental mitigation, and they go and make a bat habitat somewhere else. But this is the problem. There would appear to be nobody in charge. So anyway, that's all I have to say, really. And this is the scene that we hope to recreate in about a year's time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right, we did say questions at the end.
Yeah, any questions?
And then there's a rake of questions here from Robert Tate. Robert, could you want to put your microphone on and ask them in person? He's obviously not.
No,
Okay, the first one he's saying is, are you planning to put the siding back at Salehurst?
yes, there will be a siding there for temporary construction purposes only, and that's all. It won't be there permanently.
Next one was Schweitzer electronic level crossings have been used for Dean Forest Railway level crossings, I believe.
So right, okay. So there is precedent, has been used and tried and tested and proven. I mean, for Network Rail, it has to be Network Rail approved. For us, we just get anything, which is satisfactory for national highways, which I assume would be a lower criteria.
Okay, next point was the Easter abutment at Bridge 6 has Himalayan balsam there too, question mark.
Oh yes, so there's lots of environmental nasties there. We've got Japanese knotweed in the area as well. So all invasive species have to be dealt with, which we will do.
And his final comment was, Well, no, it's got another comment after that. I agree about the anti-tourism policies comment as a fellow Welsh Railway volunteer.
Yes, this is the problem. I didn't actually dwell on that too much, but we have a little bit of a problem in North Wales at the moment with increasing council tax for second homes, holiday homes, Airbnbs, all that kind of thing, and it's not really helping.
Yeah. And his final comment was, sorry, got no microphone, so he couldn't ask the question. So, that answers your question. Sorry for pressurising you, so that's a tough in, so you didn't have a microphone. So that completes the questions online. Is there any questions from the room? Richard?
Just the one, going back to the inquiry,
Yes.
did you get a sort of feeling or during the inquiry which way it might be swinging?
I suppose you could. It's if you've got that kind of feeling that it was going in your favour by the calibre of the questioning, but of course
Yes.
it can go either way. With the
Yeah.
Welsh Highland
Yeah.
Railway, we had 3 inquiries. In 2 of those, the inspector ruled against us, and the Secretary of State overturned it. So everything's up for grabs. And you don't know how it's going to pan out. There's a lot of procedural stuff in there, a lot of barristers, a lot of highly articulate witnesses, and it's very fraught and uncertain process.
And I have a second one.
Yes.
The platform, the copings, the brick coping at Roberts Bridge.
Yes.
The overhang didn't look like very much. Can you just comment about what the standard is that was required?
With a new construction, we would be required to have an overhang of sorts in the traditional manner in case somebody
Yes.
falls off. So there is an overhang there, and I can't categorically say it complies with the standard strictly, but it has to be satisfactory. It's been approved anyway.
Right.
ORR. I mean, we can't just go and think. Everything has to be approved and signed off by the railway inspectorate. So they're happy with it.
Picked up a leaflet some years ago about the inquiry going in for the level crossing on the bypass. But I should write in, so I did, and said to them, well, it shouldn't be a problem because they do it between Shells and Flemingford. They were crossing over the line there.
This is the problem here. We are putting back 2 level crossings. The railway had been gone for a long time, since '96. People have got used to it not being there, and the whole thing had been totally erased from the landscape. And in the case of the A21, we've actually put back a new crossing where there was never one before. We believe this to be the first time in 50 years.
But no, the fact is, no, there is an existing level crossing over a major road
Yes.
with a preserve railroad.
Yeah.
Going across it. I said, well, it's there already. So
if it's there already, then you're
well,
okay.
no, it's right. To put in.
Yeah.
But it transport it, so it's
The railway was there, but it was a new road.
The
The railway was already there
yes.
and existed, and it was a new road, so that was why they had to put a level crossing in. To
Right.
maintain the existing road.
Yeah.
So
So
exactly the opposite
If
way.
the railway's there already,
The
then it
railway
takes
was there
precedent.
already.
Yes.
but you've still got the interface between the two,
Yes, that's right.
which is
Yes, it works in exactly the same way. It's the principle of whether you had to have
Yes.
permission.
On the subject of coal, you're probably aware of these things. They're like a squashed lemon. It's called an ovoid, and
We used them during the war on the grate in the city.
oh right, okay. Well, that's what we have to use nowadays when we can't get the proper stuff. And I think I mentioned to you, Richard, that these do not burn very well in Great Western locomotives. In fact, they don't burn at all. And even for small engines, they are problematical. That size is 40 millimeters, and first criteria is the fire bar spacing, and they can tend to roll down to the front and clog up the ashpan and just smoulder in the ashpan. So it's not the ideal fuel, but that's what we're going to have to get used to.
John was trying to ask a question.
I was just going to point out another example of tourism versus the government or whoever
Yes,
is Buckfastleigh having lost the Ashburton branch because they just built a bypass road. And it just seems nothing has changed. And the attitude is still there. I would hesitate to criticise my former colleagues in the inspectorate, but there is all a lot of historic aversion, like third rail extension, from
Yes.
Wokingham to Ash. I mean, if anybody, even non-Rowan, can see it is a viable case, but because of tradition instigated by non-accountable people and possibly
Well-
non-professional people. You say, yes, there's a lot of articulate people around.
yes.
Articulate doesn't mean to say they've got any knowledge behind them. I think for myself,
Well, sadly, this is the case, and the Department of Transport hold all the cards. It's the Secretary of State, and the problem is that there hasn't been any effort made to preserve or retain old railway formations. In other countries, you see all across Europe, railways become disused, they're just left, and they can be brought back into use. In this country, sold off as soon as they can. Bridges demolished, embankments removed, cuttings filled in, and it makes it extremely difficult to reopen any railways. And that one, for example, the Gloucestershire, Warwickshire line between Stratford and Cheltenham, it's tantalisingly close to being a through route, but you can't. The cost of putting it back kills the business case, and so it's unlikely. And the same applies to all the other candidates for reversing beaching. In fact, one could even say the only reason we have any railways at all is they were built before people had cars, because you just can't make them pay in the sense of getting the money back through the fare box. They always need a subsidy. Our subsidy is the volunteers and donations.
Just got one more comment from home viewers.
Yes.
It says here, idle thought some of the local infected ash trees were adopted by the Wood Turners Society, and some very nice bowls were sold at the Christmas sale.
Excellent. So it found a more refined use than wood chip biofuel. That's reassuring.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't quite know how to pronounce that person's name. Miria.
Yeah,
Sorry, but,
okay. Yes.
which is why I avoided.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Tony, you have.
Sorry about the landowners and the problems you had with the resentment about the compulsory purchase. Has that died away now? Or
Not
or
really.
is there still some resentment?
The landowners are still extremely opposed. I mean, they have realised they have to play by the rules, but they're making it awkward for us. They're watching our every move. So 1 foot out of place, and they scream to local authority that we're not doing things right. And also, we've got the flood has come, and some of our earth mounds have been transposed onto their fields. We've got to move it straight away, and we are interfering with their free movement to cattle. Can we go and do something? It's a fraught relationship, I'm afraid, and that's going to be the case. So because they've been forced into it, they've had their two farms cut in half.
Yeah.
And it's not everybody's idea of fun, is it? So we've had to, we're doing what we can.
What about the other local residents, people at Roberts Bridge and around?
Well, I think generally they're in favour, because there will be an increase in trade in Robertsbridge. There's a few hotels, you've got gift shops and retail outlets which will benefit, as indeed going further along you've got Bodiam Castle, very large tourist attraction. And so everybody, all the community stands to gain. And we don't, because we have to put in the subsidy by volunteers and donations to keep it going. I don't believe that we'll get any grants for this. For the Welsh Highland Railway, it was grants funded by the Millennium Commission and the European Regional Development Funds. I'm not sure if any such funding would be forthcoming for this. There may be applications going in that I'm not aware of.
What about line side fencing? Is there,
Yes,
is there a requirement to have specific type in certain areas or?
absolutely.
Yeah,
There is, I mean, there has to be line side fencing
Yeah.
everywhere,
yeah,
as is the tradition in this country, and it will be stock proof fencing. There are animals in the fields both sides, and so there'll be the usual stock proof barbed wire, and has to be maintained by us.
Okay, I think we've probably run our course in questions. We're getting close. I know that the nominated individual to do the voting banks has got a capture train, so I need to make sure he gets his spot. So could I ask Tony Roberts to do the voter thanks, please? If you can stay there, I'll turn that round, or you can see the front, here from the front. Get it all on screen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, everyone. I always look forward to coming to meetings where we've got a section member giving the talk. I think we've had some excellent meetings over the last few years. Some of our members, in fact, to me, they're the most enjoyable members. And that sometimes it takes us back to the early days of the PWI, which was about everybody getting together and sharing best practice and that. Today's talk has covered both history and modern railways. And as Secretary mentioned, we have a mix of historical talks and current talks. You managed to bridge both today, John. Your talk certainly met the very high standard that other members have given. It was extremely comprehensive. We've heard about the history of the East Sussex Railway and then the Rother Railway. And we've heard particularly the history of the bureaucracy of the last 15 years or so that you've been dealing with bureaucracy. I think you said at the beginning something about building a railway is very straightforward. And,
Yes, it is.
I think you're probably right.
We've had 200 years of practice. It's not difficult.
But having said that, I think you've taken us again through most of the disciplines that be covered by permanent way. I think the one, there was a couple missing. Fencing was one. We got fencing at the end there.
Yes.
And of course, another discipline you haven't covered is track as such. And hopefully in a year or so's time, we will come back to hear about the track issues.
That's the icing on the cake. Easy.
But you've covered structures, you've covered drainage, and earthworks, you've covered utilities, you've covered dealing with the neighbours, which was a very problematical area. So I think we've really had a good permanent way talk today. And it's been a good talk about how you've brought an historic structures and assets up to cope with the modern standards. An amazing number of site images. There's somebody whispered to me there are over 100, so you must have put an awful lot of work and time and effort into producing this. So I think thank you very much for all your work, for an excellent talk. And if we all join in thanking John in the evening.
Thank you, John. If I can take my seat back.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
We'll start again. Finalise. Right, Richard. Next meeting, please.
Right. Well, the next meeting is actually about track. Colin Brading is going to give our talk next meeting. Next meeting is on the 10th of September, a few days before the highlight of the Stockton Darlington 200 celebrations at the end of September. So the idea of the talk is to pick up on it's a working title at the moment, the evolution of railway track. So start right back from the beginning of using pieces of ash to run the wagons on to burning them to make the engines go. The talk is being developed, of course, and all talks sort of reach their perfection just a few hours before presentation. But I'm sure from what Colin's done before, we'll have an absolutely excellent time on the 10th of September. And that will be the first of our presentations for the next technical session, 2025-2026 technical session. So that's the position.
Okay,
And it's going to be held here.
good. Thank you very much. Just like to apologise to the people in the room and also the people at home. The slides were not moving on. I have no idea why they were changing here. It's the same pictures. They should have been changing there as well. So the reason I kept moving it on to move it back again was so that the slides at home were keeping up with what we were doing. So if you wondered what the hell I was doing, that's what I was trying to do, was make sure that the people at home were seeing the same pictures as we were. I have no idea why this one would move on and that one wasn't, because it is the same picture. So
You don't need to apologise, Jeremy, you've got it right.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. It did work. It did work.
So apologies for that. Thank you for the people at home joining us tonight. It was a good turnout at home. Thank you to everyone in here for coming for the last presentation of the season. It just leaves me to wish everyone a good summer break. Please remember, if you want to go to Platters, you need to sign in here, or if there's anyone at home who wants to go to Platters, shout out and we will put you on the list. So that we can get that underway. We will send something out by email, hopefully early next week, end of this week. I'm not quite sure, but we've got a sort of 48-hour delay. So we'll do our best to get it out as quickly as we can. So all have a good summer and look forward to seeing you in September. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. Good night.
Oh, yeah. Those at home, when you switch off, please log out so that the recording will stop. Otherwise, it'll go on infinitely. So please press the red leave button in the corner and disappear off the screen, and that way the recording will stop and I won't get a poke in the eye. Control that. Thank you very much.
It's been great about old tracks.
I
can't remember what he asked me. Paul Richmond. Yes, he wasn't that bad.
You're saying he was, so you asked him.
No.